So here we go. I'm going to start today NFC, tomorrow AFC. Now, you got to have 4 minimum total new playoff teams. The average is about 6 over the last 20 years. I will tell you I've got 4 or more, and here we go. So we start with the NFC East. The Commanders had a very good free agency period. I like their GM. I think Eagles-Commanders will battle down to the end. A lot of free agent losses for the Eagles. They still have the deepest roster. I'll pick them over the Commanders, but I think the Commanders, Laramie Tunsil, Debo Samuel, is a win-now acquisition. They kept guys like Zach Ertz. So I think that's a very close competition. I'll take the better roster to win. Dallas third, not active in free agency, still got to pay Micah, up against the cap. Dak Prescott off a second lower body injury. Giants, it doesn't really matter if Aaron goes there, Russell Wilson goes there. I think there's going to be so much pressure on the organization to win now. I'll pick the Giants for fourth. NFC North. This is the toughest division for me in football. The Lions have the best roster. I'll pick them 1. The Vikings have the worst roster. I'll pick them 4. And yes, Chicago's got a tough road schedule. No question. But they literally went and got Pro Bowlers on their interior O-line. And again, if they can get a running back with their first pick, the coaching upgrade at Chicago from what they were to what they are is going to be like the quarterback upgrade from Will Levis to Cam Ward. It's going to change outcomes. I have Chicago second. Here's Green Bay's tough for me because I've got to be totally honest about this. I really fell for Jordan Love. But last year against playoff teams, dude completed 60% of his throws with a passer rating at 81 and was 2-6. In the building at the end of the year, I watched the way they coached him. I think they lost some confidence in him. So I think Bears-Packers is down to the final week of the year to figure out who gets into the playoffs. NFC South, I believe in Michael Penix. I don't like him not having Grady Jarrett, but I don't like him losing Drew Dalman in the center. The Bucs are getting old. They're bringing back the entire offense. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not. I like the trajectory of Atlanta, and I'm a big Michael Penix fan. Carolina will be better, but an average roster. Saints up against the cap. Kind of rigid there. I just don't like their direction. NFC West. So I have the Rams winning it. I have no problem with that. Devontae Adams, one of the smartest acquisitions. That will work. Their defense could be the best in the league this year if they can get a corner in the draft somewhere. Great coaching. Okay, Seahawks-Niners, I would love to watch the draft. Niners have 12 picks. Seattle's got to upgrade on the offensive line. But if you look at Seattle's schedule, woo-wee, NFC South, AFC South, that Seahawks schedule is screaming 10-11 wins. Niners, meanwhile, 12 draft picks with a very complicated offensive system means I think they could be kind of trying to figure out what the heck they are till Thanksgiving. That is a lot of new players on the roster, and they lost really good players. Seahawks, Niners, like Bears, Packers, I think play down to the final weekend to see who gets into the playoffs. Arizona, no massive upgrades, are what they are. So, my division winners, Eagles, Lions, Falcons, Rams. Falcons are a new playoff team. Wild card, Commanders, Bears, Seahawks, both squeak in. So I have 3 new playoff teams, the Falcons, the Bears, and the Seahawks. You got to have 4 new ones every year minimum, closer to 6. So I don't think, listen, Atlanta, before Kirk Cousins fell apart, they beat Tampa twice. I don't think I'm taking a big swing here. I like Penix a lot. There you go. Let's bring in Geoff Schwartz, played in the NFL 8 years, dominant lineman, 3-year starter, right tackle, Oregon. So give me something you like about that and something you strongly disagree with, Geoff.
Who's going to protect Sam Darnold? That's my question in Seattle, right? Where last year with the Vikings, he had everything. Offensive line, some issues in the middle, but good tackles. He had great wide receivers, good tight end, good running back, good play caller. Now in Seattle, offensive line in question, 1 wide receiver right now. I just think we're high on Darnold because we like the story last year. I just don't know if he's going to play very well in Seattle. Another thing is I think the Panthers are going to be good. They showed at the end of last season they're close, right? You sort of have to lose close games before you start winning close games. That happened a lot at the end of the season. I like their acquisitions. The South is just meh, right? It's a good division, not great. So the Panthers, I think, can contend for a wild card spot. But I do like Michael Penix with Atlanta. He's a good football player. I saw that up front for many years, watching that Oregon-Washington rivalry. They're going to be better than people think because I think Penix will inject some life into that offense.
All right, Geoff Schwartz, offensive line 8 years, all Pac-12 when he was at Oregon. I want to talk Shedeur Sanders. So my take is Cam Ward's a better talent. I like Shedeur. He has something in common with Brock Purdy. No offensive line of note in college. Maybe one great skill person, Travis Hunter, or I think Breece Hall was like with Brock Purdy, if I recall. But my takeaway is there is value for Josh Allen, Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Jared Goff, Shedeur Sanders, Brock Purdy, not being surrounded with All-Americans and 5-star players. For that reason, I like Shedeur. He got beat up, played from behind, no run game. I like him. Do you?
I like him. I mean, look, you're right about the grit. He got beat up for 2 years, and every time he got hit, he got back up, got back in the huddle, and kept playing. You're right, no run game. Wasn't much support offensively. The offensive structure, not great there, right? And there's intangibles there. He's accurate. He's good in the pocket. I mentioned the grit already, right? Now, the question is, holding the ball too long and taking those sacks, those translate to the NFL. So let's put him in a better offense. Let's start with that. The offense he'll play in the NFL will be better. The Colorado offense was a wreck. Formationally, it was boring. They didn't have to throw the ball downfield very much. So if you put him in a pro offense, behind a better offensive line, those things, the accuracy, the toughness, the pocket mobility, those should shine. The question's, I think, again, is he going to be like Caleb Williams, who held the ball a bunch in college at USC, got sacked a bunch in college, and then we saw last season, didn't play behind a great offensive line. I get that. Scheme issues in Chicago as well, but sacked a lot and held onto the ball a little bit too much. So can you get that out of Shedeur's game with a better team, a better offense, and better things around him?
Okay, let's go to a teammate, Travis Hunter. Urban Meyer says, never quite seen anything like it generationally. I'd let him play both sides. You, 3-year starter in college, played in the NFL. Do you think players will buy into, let the kid start at corner and wide receiver?
I think it's too much, Colin. Travis Hunter is incredible. I didn't really buy the argument that he shouldn't get the Heisman. That was kind of interesting to me. If you watch him play, I mean, incredible athlete, gets the ball every time. You see right here on the screen, like, catch the ball, gone. Number one corner, too. Like, he's incredible. The question is this, is, you have basically 2 playbooks, right? You have a defensive playbook that's this big, and they're on iPads now. It's a little bit different, but an offensive playbook this big. How do you do both at the same time? Right? You practice one day with the wide receivers and one day with the corners. I think it's easier to be a full-time corner and then say, hey, Travis, here is 10 plays on offense. Can you run them on Friday at practice? Or maybe you stay after for 5-10 minutes on Thursday and just we'll have this package of plays for you, which is really at Colorado. He didn't move a lot on offense, Colin. He kind of stayed on one side of the ball.
Yeah.
He ran a couple things. Like, he wasn't a guy that did a ton on offense. He's just that good that when he got the ball in his hands, it was incredible. So that's how I would play it. I would say, look, you're a corner, and then we'll give you 10, 15 plays on offense. You have to spend a lot of time in that offensive meeting room because you have to get ready to play corner in the NFL.
So when in your years in the NFL, we talk about free agency. And I think free agency, like, for instance, I like what the Bears did, but offensive line is a chemistry unit position. So it's going to take a while. And, by the way, Joe Thuney's not going to take a lot of preseason snaps. Drew Dahlman's not going to take a lot of preseason snaps. So the combination of offensive line is a cohesion unit. That takes time. And the fact that old O-linemen are not going to – they just don't play those guys on the O-line. So I think the Bears could be really good. Is it possible, though, that the Bears are going to take until Thanksgiving to get that O-line right?
It's not just that, Colin. It takes 8 to 10 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, for a new coordinator to instill, the basically the offense and defense of what they want their team to be. I think a great example last year is Vic Fangio in Philly, right? First couple of weeks, first 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it was like, what's this defense? And all of a sudden, they figure things out, and boom, they were as good as they were, obviously, the rest of the season. On the offensive side of the ball, the same thing is true, right? You're going to run different plays each week. You have to figure out what you're good at. You might go into seasons, hey, I've always run outside zone. Let's try outside zone. Then boom, week 8, it's like, that's not really good. Let's run something else. So it just takes time. You need to be able to work your protections around every different look you might see. You might see it once a game. And so by the week 8, 9, 10, you know what you're good at. You know what you're bad at. And you grow together. And then to your point, by Thanksgiving, you start feeling better about your offense. The Bears' goal this year is very simple, right? Is you need to end this season knowing Caleb Williams is your franchise quarterback.
Yes.
And that includes growth from quarter to quarter, right? Like in week 8, he should look better than week 4. In week 12, he should look better than week 8. And so that's the goal this season, is to build, and they have done that so far, an offensive line around him, wide receivers around him, to make sure the end of the season, he's your bona fide franchise guy. If he's not, then they'll find someone else. So that's the goal this year, and it might take a little bit of time to see that with all the new parts.
So what I said, I would have torn down the Niners last year. I thought they waited too long. Yeah. I also thought they were a little too permissive on contracts, whereas the Rams would go to Stafford and say, this is the number, deal with it. They were a little ice cream for breakfast dad for the last several years in negotiation, and it caught them. Given Debo and Brandon Ayuk big money, I wouldn't have done it. I said this. I think I have to watch their draft. But 12 draft picks, Jeff, is a lot. And the NFL is highly complicated. One of the reasons I like Seattle is that they're going to bring back, outside of the receivers, mostly the same guys with the injection of maybe 3 starters. San Francisco let go of so many good players, they need 6 guys to play a lot that are like young kids. Tell me, when you were in the NFL, you were a 3-year starter in college, smart guy, so you move in, but 12 new players, that's what worries me about the rebuild. Like, it is sudden.
Well, I think part of the problem, Colin, is, and you mentioned it, they need a lot of guys because they've actually missed on the draft the last 3 or 4 years. Go look at their draft picks. Not a lot of guys starting for them right now, or not a lot of guys impactful football players. Now, some of those draft picks were traded away for Trey Lance, which obviously is a problem. You'd love to have those picks back. I think some went for the Trent Williams deal as well. They just haven't drafted well for 3 or 4 years. They're a very top-heavy team, and when the top is gone and they've lost some of those guys, you look at the rest of the team and where are those guys at? Where's the next crop of players to take over for the veterans, what the best teams do? So, yeah, they might have 12 draft picks, but the last 3 or 4 years, they haven't proven to hit on those draft picks. And so I got to see that this season. You know, the influx of guys obviously is great. You need that at some point. But you need those young guys to become superstars, to become, the core of your team. Right now, if you're a Niner fan, list it off. Who is the core of your team on a rookie contract right now? Brock Purdy? Give me those guys. You don't have enough of those guys. So, yeah, it's great to have draft picks, but they got to start hitting on these guys.
Yeah. I was saying this earlier that we all know, everybody, when you go to a doctor, I've been to 10 doctors in my life. Yeah. 3 or 4 are great, 3 or 4 are okay, and a couple aren't good. When you step on a plane, most of the pilots are very capable. Sully Sullenberger's more than capable. There are a lot of average pilots out there. And in the NFL, you forget that some of these coordinators are great, and a lot of them aren't. So I said, Philadelphia is a great example. Great coordinators, both leave, hire 2 new ones, did not work. I feel like, but they got it right the next time. Detroit's fascinating to me. They lose Ben Johnson. What are the chances your next coordinator's as good as Ben Johnson? They lose Aaron Glenn. What are the chances your next coordinator's as good as Aaron Glenn? Tell the audience, in your years in the NFL, did you know immediately if your team missed on a position or coordinator? Did you know immediately?
Well, I think you don't know until you play games. Now, there are certain times I play with coaches that I thought immediately, like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, and you typically end up maybe being right. But that's also when you're an older player, right? You've been around enough coaches, you know what they feel like. But I think it's worth giving them the benefit. I just mentioned with the Bears, it takes 8 to 10 to 12 weeks to feel good. It'd be, I think it'd be wrong to just go into a season thinking your coordinator is not good. But I've certainly played with coordinators I didn't think were good and ended up being right about it. But look, it's not our job to complain about that, right? Our job's to go play on Sunday. So even if we didn't trust the guy or we didn't think the play calls were good, you got to go out and execute. And obviously it shows in wins and losses, at the end of the season, whether or not that worked out. But you can tell early on whether guys are cut out for it. But it's more than just like calling plays, right? It's the leadership, it's communication, it's making adjustments. And the best coordinators, what they do now, this is better than ever before, in my opinion, in the NFL. is they tailor their scheme, what they're good at as coaches, to what the players are good at, right? And you can feel that early. Is a coach willing to maybe do something different, something out of their comfort zone to make the players play better? That you can feel early on. Now, again, coaches have the ability to adapt and change, and there's plenty of examples of that happening. But you can sort of feel those things early, right? Communication, adjustments, willingness to work with players on certain things. Maybe you bring in a free agent that doesn't quite do what you do, but you paid him anyways, and he's got to be able to perform. Are you willing to adapt what you do, change what you do? Not your core principles exactly, but just maybe change enough to make that veteran player happy and play well. So those are things players can pick up pretty early.
One more college question. I want to go back. Cam Ward, to me, is the one guy in the draft that will change outcomes. And I think about this all the time. It's not just that he's talented, but Tennessee right now is kind of untalented at quarterback. So the difference, the swing could be like 7 points, 8 points from what you are to what you could be. Because I think Cam's a field goal difference because he's so spectacular. Nobody has NFL film on him. It's a weak division. You're kind of guessing till Thanksgiving. I think Cam Ward is the one player in this draft that could change outcomes. I think Tennessee's actually going to be one of the surprise teams. You watched them a ton. At Washington State, you watched him. You watched him at Miami. What do you make of him as a prospect?
Well, I think you're right about the supreme talent he's got, right? Like you see that all over the field. He has a better arm than Sanders. He can run the ball really well, as we know, as you see right here. You just got to take those bad decisions out of his game. The Cal game you showed, he just had an atrocious interception middle of second quarter. Like those have got to go. So if you can get him to just be able to play within himself and use his physical traits. I want to bring up something too that I think is important here. He has not played a lot of quarterback in sort of a quote unquote pro style, right? So he didn't play he didn't throw the ball in high school. He goes to Incarnate Word, plays a run and shoot, and they actually played like 2 seasons in 1 calendar year because of COVID. Goes to Washington State, plays in a run and shoot again, and he goes to Miami and plays really his first time in what would be more of a quote normal offense, right, Colin? So he hasn't really had a lot of quarterback reps in what would simulate what he might see in the NFL. So there's a lot of rawness to his game that a coach can mold because he's very talented. He's got a great arm. It's just, can you avoid those negative plays, right? Can you avoid, just take what's there. Take the 7-yard throw. Take the 8-yard throw. If there's pressure, can you see it? Can you get rid of the ball? So physically, it's all there. It's a matter of harnessing and taking away the bad plays to highlight the good plays.
Geoff Schwartz, he's on First Things First as well today. As always, nobody watches more college football, and it should be noted bets on it, than Geoff Schwartz. Good seeing you, bud.
Yes.